Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina right here on WWBG 1470 AM at TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. Oh, baby, what a show we have for you. Lots of information to get to in this hour. We'll talk some NFL playoffs. We'll talk some ACC basketball. We'll talk about the Panthers coaching search and much, much more, including two great interviews we have scheduled for you as well. But let's go ahead, folks, on this Friday afternoon and start out with what we spoke about the last 2 weeks on this show. Unfortunately, we still got to talk about it. Who is going to be the Carolina Panthers' next head coach? And you know who it's going to be? No, I don't. I know who it should be. Steve Wilkes, and we've been talking about this. Yet now the name Sean Payton comes up. That's right. Former New Orleans Saints Sean Payton, who's basically been told by owner David Tepper, according to sources, that he could pretty much have anything he wants if he becomes the head coach of this team, which I believe to be ludicrous, crazy, stupid, disturbing, and whatever other words you would like to use. Let's think about this for the moment. Hey, I like Sean Payton. He's a great, great coach. He was, 152 and 89 overall as a coach, 9-8 in the playoffs, has a Super Bowl under his belt. Yes, I like him. But do we like him at the cost it's going to cost us to get him? And I say no. And I'll tell you why, folks. I don't have to go ahead and talk about again and again and again how great of a job Steve Wilkes has done in many different areas of leadership for this Carolina Panthers team over the past 12 weeks of the season. We all know that already, and we've talked about that already. But what does it cost to get Sean Payton? 102 first-round draft picks. I'm hearing it would cost 1 first-round draft picks. But if you're a team like Carolina, who the second half of this season has played so well, and possibly you're 1 or 2 players away from getting to the playoffs and maybe even getting to the promised land, what we call the Super Bowl, do you want to give up that first-round draft pick? My question is no. Why not keep Steve Wilkes, who has proven that he is a great head coach and a great head coach for this organization, and go out and use your first-round draft pick to get maybe another solid wide receiver to go along with this receiving core they already have? That's what I would do. That's what I think they should do. I don't understand David Tepper. Why are you making this so complicated? Why are we making this so complicated? Everybody, it doesn't matter who you talk to, believes and thinks and understands that Steve Wilkes should be the head coach. Stop playing games, okay? Stop playing games. I'm not disrespecting or underestimating what a Sean Payton can do, but the best thing that can happen to the Carolina Panthers is the Denver Broncos announced that he's their new head coach. That's the best thing I believe that can happen to the Carolina Panthers. All right, folks, let's move on. Unbelievable. Who's going to go to the AFC Championship? Who's going to go to the NFC Championship? We're going to find out, folks. Excuse me while I drink a little bit of water there. And we're going to find out real quick here coming up this weekend as we have some unbelievable games. But before we get to that, I want to get to ACC basketball. Some unbelievable games coming up this weekend. It starts with Duke. Miami is visiting Duke. Miami 15-3 versus Duke 13-5. Let me tell you, you all know what I believe about Duke. You listen to this show week after week after week in men's basketball, And I tell you how overrated, I believe the Duke Blue Devils are. Miami has 3 incredible guards in Isaiah Wong, who's averaging 16.7 points a game, 4.5 rebounds, and 3.8 assists. You add that to that trifecta of the guard I was talking about with Jordan Miller, who's averaging 14.8, and Nigel Pack averaging 11.6. This is a very good outside shooting team. Okay. Meanwhile, they got an inside game with Amir, who's averaging 14 points a game and 10.2 rebounds. Meanwhile, Duke, yes, they got Kyle Filipowski, who's averaging 14.8 points a game, 9.2 rebounds, and I love this kid. I really love this kid. But Jeremy Roach, folks, is it me? Tell me. Respond, whatever you have to do. But is he underachieving this year? I believe he is. What's he averaging? 11.9 points a game, and they cannot win without Jeremy Roach getting it going. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, Duke they just play inconsistent. I'm taking Miami this weekend over Duke in that game. Meanwhile, we go to Virginia at Wake Forest. What an intriguing game. Virginia 14-3 at Wake Forest 14-5. I mean, neither one of these teams are very good at rebounding. But the good thing for Virginia is they don't turn over the ball much. I think they're averaging 8 turnovers a game. Wake Forest is averaging 12 a game. I love Wake Forest. Tyree Appleby, 18.1 points a game, 3.1 rebounds, 6.1 assists. And how about Cameron Hildreth, 13.1 points a game and 6.3 rebounds a game. But the guy who's been coming up late for them has been Andrew Carr. He has continued to, the last 2 games, rebounding 11 versus Clemson, 13 versus Boston College. He also scored 18 and 21 points respectfully in this game as I just go to my notes here. And I'll tell you what, folks, when you look at this game, I really, really believe that Wake Forest has a chance at this game. I really do believe that. I'm going with the upset. I'm picking Wake Forest to go ahead and defeat Virginia in an upset. Meanwhile, I'm looking for some notes over here, so stay with me, folks, as I look for something real quickly. I just had notes here about the NC State game that I want to talk about real quickly here. Don't know what I did with my notes. There we go. As we look up NC State here, who's playing University of North Carolina, the Tar Heels. NC State having a respectful year, 15-4. 13-6 for North Carolina. But I still believe, folks, and I said it once, I'll say it twice. I still believe that the Tar Heels have the most balanced team in the whole NCAA. I said it, I'll say it again. UNC has the most well-balanced team in the ACC. I mean, look at this team. They got Armando Buquette, 17.6 points a game, 11.2 rebounds. You got Caleb Love, R.J. Davis, Pete Nance, Leaky Black. You got Trimble and Johnson off the bench. Unbelievable the team this Tar Heels team has. Meanwhile, NC State ain't a slouch here either, folks. They got a good team. How about Jaquavian Smith, 19.1 points a game. Jaquil Joyner, 16.2 points. I like DJ Burns. I've been liking him all year long, but I just think that the bench of UNC is going to be way too much for the Wolfpack to handle. I'm taking the Tar Heels in this one at home versus NC State. We move on now to the NFL playoffs, and what a week it is. The Jaguars, who came back versus the Chargers in that unbelievable game, are playing the Chiefs, who are an 8.5 favorite. I mean, Let me just say this. There's no way Trevor Lawrence can come out in this game and have the same performance that he had in the first half of that game and expect to win. You can't have 4 turnovers, 4 interceptions in a half and expect to win, although they did come back and win, but not versus a Chiefs team, okay? I mean, in order for the Jaguars to even have a chance in this game, they're going to have to contain Patrick Mahomes. Because I know they got Pacheco in the backfield, but they are not a strong running team, the Chiefs. But they got the beast at tight end, Travis Kelce, who is having who had an unbelievable year. But I just think this Chiefs team is really, really tough with Patrick Mahomes. Meanwhile, they got a good running game, the Jaguars. Travis Etienne Jr., over 1,100 yards this year. But they have to win the turnover battle. They have to create turnovers, the Jaguars, if they have any chance to win. And Trevor Lawrence cannot make mistakes. At the end of the day, I think the Chiefs are too tough at Arrowhead, and they will defeat they will definitely defeat the Jaguars. Meanwhile, the late game on Saturday, the Giants at Eagles. Talk about a well-balanced team. I don't think there's a better well-balanced team in the NFL than the Philadelphia Eagles. Philadelphia Eagles, 7.5 favorite in this game. But the Giants do have a healthy Saquon Barkley, and we've seen what can happen when you have a great Saquon Barkley as they defeated the Vikings last week. But, the only thing about the Giants that scare me is that they can run the football. They are a great, great running team. Meanwhile, Jalen Hurts leads the Eagles, okay? I believe he's a much better quarterback than Daniel Jones, although Daniel Jones takes a lot of crap in New York, undeservingly so. He had a pretty good year with 17 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. They got a running game. But when you look at the Eagles, I mean, Jalen Hurts, he scares me when he runs the ball. He scares me because he's going to get hurt sooner or later running the ball. But they got a great offense besides that. Sanders, 1,200 yards rushing. Tommy Antonio Brown hasn't been an unbelievable pickup for this team, getting 1,400 yards plus and 11 touchdowns. Meanwhile, the Eagles are 18-6, have won 75% of the last games of the games they played, the last 24 games anyway. I want the Giants to win this game. I would love to see the Giants win this game. But at the end of the day, I'm sorry, folks. This game is going to go ahead. And I'm just looking around here. I have definitely the Eagles winning that game. Meanwhile, why am I missing a game here? We'll find that out in a minute. Meanwhile, the Bengals at the Bills. 2 well-matched teams. Burrows versus Allen. Who makes the least mistakes? Both quarterbacks they do have the ability to make a lot of mistakes, although they are great quarterbacks. Burrows, 36 touchdowns. Allen, 38 touchdowns. Burrows, 4,600 yards. Allen, 4,600 yards. Difference, Stephon Diggs. And the person that's going to play a big role in this game, I believe, is Dawson Knox, the tight end. But meanwhile, Cincinnati responds with Jamar Chase, 9 touchdowns, 1,000 yards. They got T. Higgins. They got Boyd. And Tyler Boyd, I'll tell you what about Tyler Boyd. He always figures out a way to come through in the big games. So look out for Tyler Boyd. Wrapping it up, could be one of the better games of the weekend. Cowboys versus 49ers. 49ers favored by 4. Cowboys always find a way. They always find a way to lose the big games. Dak Prescott always stumbles, in my opinion, in the big games. But yet, these are 2 well-matched teams. But at the end of the day, when you look at these teams, San Francisco has McCaffrey, who has been unbelievable since arriving in San Francisco. They got Debo. They got Ayuk. They got Kittle. Dak's going to be pressured all day long in this game. When I say all day long, he's going to be hit. He's going to be battered. He's going to be bruised in this game. At the end of the day, I don't care if Brock Purdy is the quarterback. The kid has handled himself very well under pressure. I think he wins again, and the 49ers will be in the NFC Championship. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you what. Our first segment goes very, very quick here. Very, very quick here. Here on Frankly Speaking Sports. We're going to go ahead and take a break. Then when we come back from break, we're going to have a gentleman who's been on the New York Giants beat since 1993. He is the New York Giants host reporter for MSG, WFAN, and Giants.com. We will have Paul Dottino joining us here on Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina. We'll be back right after this. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to WWBG 1470 AM and Tobacco Road Sports Radio.com. You know, we talked in the first segment about the upcoming playoff games this weekend. We went over some picks. And I'll tell you what, the surprise team of the year, the surprise team of the playoffs so far have to be the New York Giants and the way they are playing so far. And it is my great honor, thrill, and pleasure to welcome in on the WWBG 1470 AM hotline. He has been the beat on the New York Giant beat since 1983. He's also the New York Giant host reporter for MSG, WFAN, and Giants.com. Let's welcome in Paul Dottino. Paul, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, good to talk to you. It's a very exciting time around these parts, I'll tell you that for sure.
You know, long overdue, as I say. But, Paul, let me ask you, mentioning that, I mean, would you ever believe, first of all, would you ever believe that you would have heard this time last year, New York Giants making the playoffs and then winning a playoff game?
Well, you know, going into the season, I picked the Giants to be 8-9. I thought they'd finish within a game of 500 with the possibility if everything went right and they were healthy and Jones and Barkley did what they do, maybe they could squeeze out 10 wins. I thought they might be able to sniff a playoff spot, but to get to the second round and to do it in light of all the injuries that they've had to go through and all of the free agent veterans they've picked up from the scrap heap along the way, to get this far, I mean, holy smokes. It is certainly an underdog and fairy tale story. And I think that's what makes it even more fun, because anytime you get something that you don't expect, and again, the odds were long as this team was crippled and ravaged by injury, it just makes it all the more fun.
Talk about the head coaching change at the end of the year and the difference, in your opinion, that is meant to the success of this team.
Well, you have to start with Brian Daboll, but it really extends all the way through the positional coaches. From Wink Martindale, the defensive coordinator, who they wound up getting after the Baltimore Ravens and him parted ways. They wound up swiping Mike Kafka, who was the Kansas City Chiefs quarterbacks coach, to be the offensive coordinator. Now, I thought Daboll made a brilliant move. He had been the offensive coordinator in Buffalo, where the Giants' new general manager, Joe Shane, had been the assistant. So he hires Daboll, and everybody automatically assumed that Josh Allen, who had been transformed by Daboll, was a good enough reason to make Daboll the de facto offensive coordinator, suggesting that he should call the plays and he'll probably fix Daniel Jones just like he did Josh Allen. I was so insistent against that. I don't think it's a good idea for the head coach to call plays. I especially don't think it's a good idea if he's a rookie head coach, in his first NFL season. And I was so happy when he decided to allow Kafka to call the plays, even though Dable philosophically constructed the parameters for the playbook. Kafka calls the plays. So I think that was a brilliant move by Dable, first off, because he's got two great coordinators there. Thomas McGahee was a holdover on special teams. And then the position coaches were also of the highest level. And they've really helped not only some of these rookies immediately produce, but again, how many veterans that the Giants picked up off the scrap heap, either during August or September, or even just during the season? I mean, Jared Davis, who was on the practice squad with the Lions. He had been an inside linebacker, first-round draft pick out of Florida like 4 years ago. Had been cut, released, went to the Jets, went back to the Lions, was on the practice squad. The Giants signed him 2.5 weeks ago, and now he is starting. He is starting in the NFL playoffs. It's amazing what this team has been able to do.
Yeah, and talk about, amazing. Talk about how amazing it is to have a healthy Saquon Barkley.
Oh, man. Look, the guy is elite. When they drafted him, and Dave Gettleman, the GM at the time, said you could fit him for a gold jacket, he's special. He's an offensive weapon. He's not a running back. He's a weapon. And he certainly proved that in his first season in the league when he was the offensive rookie of the year. Problem was he got sidetracked by injuries for the next 3 seasons. Yep. Even though he had added another 1,000-yard campaign in there between the knee and the ankle and the shoulder, and oh my goodness, they were putting him together with Scotch tape and clothespins. And it really sidetracked what should have been an outstanding career. And then he comes back this year, says he has the first off season of health that he can remember since he came out of Penn State. And, of course, what has he done? He's virtually duplicated what he did as a rookie. Didn't catch as many passes this year as the 91 he did when he came out of school, but he's virtually duplicated that season. And it's not a surprise, and it's a blessing to all NFL fans to get to see Saquon Barkley at his best.
We're talking to Paul DOTTINO, covers the New York Giants. Paul, let me ask you this, because I don't understand it, and maybe you can go ahead and elaborate on it or make some sense to me on it, but I like Daniel Jones. I mean, but you hear, it seems like there's a love-hate relationship between the fans there with Daniel Jones, who has had 17 touchdown passes this year, 5 interceptions. What is your assessment of Daniel Jones?
I've always been a Daniel Jones supporter. You have to remember something here in New York. There was a love-hate relationship with Phil Simms, who won a Super Bowl.
Right, I remember that.
And helped them get to a second Super Bowl championship, although Jeff Hostetler had to finish that one off. There was a love-hate relationship, too, to some degree, with Eli Manning, who won 2 Super Bowl MVPs and 2 Lombardi trophies. There's always going to be detractors, especially in New York, because there's a lot of people who are just either spoiled or just want to be grisly and angry, and they can't help themselves. I get it. Look, here's the problem, and it's not just a New York problem. Society today equates the quality of a football player to his fantasy football points.
Absolutely.
It's just that simple.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell people all the time, if you want a fantasy football quarterback, go get yourself a Kirk Cousins. Years ago, get yourself a Phillip Rivers. If you want to win a real, true, physical Vince Lombardi championship trophy and wear the jewelry that goes with it, go get yourself a Super Bowl quarterback, a guy who's going to be blood and guts, and he's going to have the demeanor and the work ethic and the resiliency and the poise and the leadership skills to be a champion. And that's the difference. And people today, if you don't score, 30 points on a given weekend for their fantasy football team, he's no good, he's a bum, what do I want him for? They equate fantasy football to quality, which is the most preposterous, ridiculous thing that the NFL has ever seen. And I guess to some degree they have a blame for it because everybody, of course, promotes fantasy football as a method of drawing interest to the game. The bad news is it warps people's values.
The Giants are coming off a huge win last week versus the Vikings, but now they're playing the Philadelphia Eagles. Are the Philadelphia Eagles, Paul, the most well-balanced team when you take offense and defense and put them together in the league?
Yeah, when they're healthy, if everything's going right, and that's why they were the number one team in the seeding for the season. They won 14-1 for nothing, at the beginning of the year until things kind of stumbled when the injuries hit them. And that's the thing. Going into the summer, I felt that they would have the most balanced, highest quality 53 in the league, that they would have the most complete roster and should be considered the favorites. I had Buffalo beating Philly in the Super Bowl only because of the intangibles that Buffalo's been knocking on the door, and I felt that if they got there, they would kick it in this time. And that was my pick. About a month or so ago, or 2 months ago, when San Francisco traded for McCaffrey, I changed my mind, and I decided that San Francisco is going to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. And even though Purdy is now their third quarterback, it doesn't seem to matter. San Francisco is on the fast track to represent the NFC. And, of course, Philadelphia has run into some potholes now along the way. And they're just not number one in my power rankings anymore. And I think they're ripe to be upset by the Giants this weekend.
Love to see it, and I agree with you. San Francisco, I have actually as well going to the Super Bowl. But can this offensive line of the Giants contain that defensive line of the Eagles?
Well, here's the interesting part. 2 weeks ago, when Philadelphia was looking to needed a win to get the top seed of the playoffs, the Giants went down to the rink and they played all their backups. They didn't play any of their starters. And the Philadelphia idea, at least from people down there who I talked to, the Eagles were hoping to get their guys out by the mid-third quarter. They couldn't do it. They had to keep all their starters in all the way to the end of the game because the Giants, with all their backups playing, gave the Eagles a dogfight and wound up falling by a touchdown. And basically, the Eagles had to recover an onside kick by the Giants with about 2 minutes to go to seal the game. I mean, they were sweating bullets. And the interesting part about that was going into the game, the Eagles needed 5 sacks to catch the Chicago Bears' all-time NFL sack record of 72. They couldn't get it. That's the amazing part about it. They couldn't get to the record. And they had a couple of 7-sack games in the previous month, a 6-sack game, a 5-sack game, and they couldn't beat the Giants' backup offensive line. The only starter who was missing from that front for Philly was Sweat, who granted is a double-digit sack guy, but they had their 3 other double-digit sack guys out there, including Hassan Reddick, and they couldn't come close to the record. The only 2 sacks they got were not of the quarterback, who, by the way, was Davis Webb that day. Yep. But it was on a botched kick by the Giants, and also on a botched wide receiver option throw. They could not collapse the pocket and get to the quarterback, and they fell short of the record. And they were too shy. They wound up at 70. Bears at 72. They need 5 to break it. And so that's my answer to you. They couldn't do it 2 weeks ago against the backups. What makes you think they're going to get to the quarterback this week?
Good question. And, Paul, let me ask you this. They got 2 unbelievable receivers on that team. As you well know, A.J. Brown's been an unbelievable addition for that team. And Devonta Smith. How do you think they match up against those receivers on defense?
It's definitely edge Eagles. I think we all know Adoree Jackson, with a little bit of bracket help occasionally over the top, did an outstanding job containing Justin Jefferson last week, who I believe is the best receiver in the league and should be the regular season MVP, by the way. but they contained him. They did not. They made sure he was not a factor in the game. So I think they can deal with A.J. Brown. Remember, Brown and Adoree Jackson from the Giants were teammates with Tennessee for a couple of years until Jackson came here to the Giants as a free agent, and then obviously A.J. Brown left via the deal with the Eagles this past season. So I don't necessarily know that he'll be a huge factor in this game. But now how do you deal with Devontae Smith? Giants are going to have to use a bunch of doubles and a bunch of disguises as Fabian Moreau, who's battling a bit of a sore hip. He's going to be drawn that assignment. The best way to stop those two guys from making big plays is to harass and absolutely belt and hammer Jalen Hurts as much as you possibly can. You know, he's coming off of that shoulder injury. Yep. Nobody seems to really know exactly how he's feeling. Well, you hit him hard, early, and often, and that will prevent him from getting off too many bombs to those wide receivers.
Besides what you just said, talk about something that the Giants have not done well this year that is important in this game, in my opinion, to prevail is to execute on third down conversions.
Well, it's interesting you say that because against Philadelphia, there's no question. I mean, they were 4 of 13 and 4 of 14. And what happens is if you get behind the chains and you're in those third and medium to third and longs, it becomes really, really difficult. And, you know, Pounders will do that to you. Sacks will do that to you. Giants also have one big problem. They drop a lot of passes. According to my tape study, and I take my own grades. I don't pay attention to those services out there. I think I have the Giants for 40 drops this year, and that's just way too high. You know, you cannot do that. And I want to say 18 of them were first down completions if they had held on to the ball.
So what you're saying, Paul, is it's not play calling, it's execution.
No question. Absolutely, no question.
Well, look, we got about a minute.
In difficult spots, or then not fulfilled what the game plan was.
Right. We got about a minute left, my friend. Talk about something we maybe haven't talked that's a key for the Giants to win. And if there's one player that people aren't thinking of on the Giants to watch out for, who would that be?
All right, very quickly, obviously the Giants have to do a solid job in pass pro to keep Daniel Jones up. The way you do that, you run the ball 35 times in this game, and you got to run the ball as a team for between 150 and 165 yards. I don't care how many Barkley has or how many Jones has, the team has to have well over 150, 165, somewhere in that vicinity. Keep the ball on the ground, turn this into a mud pie. Okay? Make it a sumo wrestling match. Because if it's a fancy game with finesse and skill position players dominating, Philly's going to win convincingly. The Giants need to slow it down, keep the score in the low 20s, and I think they've got a hell of a chance to win the game. By X factor, tight end Daniel Bellinger. Because if the Giants decide they need to use some short passes to move the ball down the field, Bellinger is the tight end, is the guy who should be able to get behind the pass rush and sneak in there and give Jones the ability to get rid of the ball quickly so that he can avoid getting sacked and try to move the ball that way with Bellinger as the target.
All right, my friend. Well, Paul, look, I want to thank you so very, very much for taking time out of, I know it is a busy week for you this week, and joining us on Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina.
Glad to be with you, and I hope I'm even busier next week.
All right, my friend. Thank you so much. Stay safe and go Giants.
Be well.
All right, that was Paul Dottino. Been covering the New York Giants since 1983. Host reporter on MSG, WFAN, and Giants.com. Folks, let's take a quick break, and we'll be back right after this message. to Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina here on WWBG 1470 AM and TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. Well, we had an interview with one of the teams already with the New York Giants, and we had a great interview that we just completed. And now we move over to an interview with AFC, the favorites, or one of the favorites, we should say, to win the AFC championship, and that would be the Kansas City Chiefs. And it is our great honor, thrill, and pleasure to have on our WWBG 1470 AM and Tobacco Road Sports Radio.com hotline is seven-time All-Pro kicker, member of the Kansas City Chiefs Hall of Fame. Let's welcome in Nick Lowery. Nick, how you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much, Larry. I was just telling you before you went on that I want to thank the NFL and the Players Association, because even though our pension's still about half what it should be, given the level of injuries that players have, and I played 18 years, but I was just a kicker, but, you know, so many injuries and things to deal with, especially when you played, let's say, at 300 pounds, and now you got a knee injury and you're 350, and they have something called the trust, and part of the trust is an available 2-day totally comprehensive evaluation, brain, cognition, and body. And, you know, when you go from having a set schedule throughout high school and college and the pros to suddenly not, it's, you know, a lot of players have difficulty staying in the same level of shape. All of us do. And so I just want to thank the NFL for that, because it's, I just found out I'm pre-diabetic. Now, I don't feel bad about it, because I know that I'm willing to do what it takes to stay healthy. But, you know, for a lot of people, not just players, you know, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what your condition is. As we get older, we've got to be proactive. So this may not be about the NFL playoffs, but it is about the partnership of the players with management, with the teams, to honor the players that built the game, and that are the reason that people come and pay the money to watch an extraordinary level of physical talent, not to mention the amazing strategic, if you will, talent of the coaches.
And talk about how important that is, Nick, especially with some of the things, the injuries, of course, DeMar Hamlin. We just saw Russell Gage of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last game. Talk about how important
Absolutely.
It is to know, and for the people, they don't always hear about this stuff, how the players and the NFL are working together, even the former players, to make sure that people aren't just staying healthy while they're playing football, but long after they're playing football as well.
Well, I would say the dark cloud that has prompted some more aggressive efforts to work together is CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. You heard about my former teammate for 2 years with the Chiefs, the Steeler great Mike Webster, in that movie, with playing Dr. Bennett Amalu, who had diagnosed CTE, and my friend, teammate on 2 Pro Bowl teams, Junior Seau, and some of the really famous players that have succumbed to it. So it hopefully has been a bellwether to just say to everyone, we have to do more. And the actual statistic that has been around for 40 years is the percentage of players that are injured every season is 100%. It's 100%. It's at some level. If you average out the missed games, et cetera, the average career is only 3.5 years. So, you know, players are paid a whole lot more now, but still they're investments. But no one cares. No one cares how much money they have, if they're dying, if they are deteriorating, if they are in bad health. You know, everything shifts in your priority. And so for me, I just want to emphasize how important this is to everyone as we get older. But for players that are used to being physical specimens and achieving physical, acts under great pressure in a very public forum, and being very proud of that and loving the work that went into it, you know, it's a difficult thing to adjust. And so to be able to accept that, I see this as a parallel to Michael Phelps and Naomi Osaka as athletes, saying, you know, we need to pay attention to mental health as well, that all of those things require us to be intentional. But what's changed is that the league and the players are being intentional together. They're working more intentionally. It wasn't without a fight. but it's so much healthier. And I think because there's so much money in players now, it's just stupid. It's just not a healthy thing in another sense to pretend like it isn't a good choice. And so the legacy of the game, to me, when players come back and their brilliant careers are overshadowed by a premature demise like Junior Seau, who committed suicide, shot himself in the chest, leaving 3 children, a wife, his mother, and so many people deeply, deeply hurt. Mark Walzak, a friend of mine, who was his teammate as a rookie with the Chargers, spent his 50th birthday week with Junior until just 3 days before he committed suicide, and never saw any hint of it. But, then you turn the page to DeMar Hamlin and Russell Gage, and you see, how quickly it can potentially end. I mean, how many of us, if we're honest, thought that DeMar Hamlin had died? How many of us thought if he hadn't died that he was going to die? And that hasn't happened. We don't want to be overly dramatic because the truth is, luckily, not many have died. But back in 1910, a guy named President Teddy Roosevelt threatened to shut down the game itself because there were 15 deaths that year. It's one of those years, right around 1910. In football, they said, we got to change the game. We have to adjust. And so the NFL has adjusted. There's more of a partnership between players. And to me, it's a beautiful thing because look at what's happened. I mean, we saved the life of somebody because we had EMTs right on the sideline. And you saw how the teams in the country really came, in a beautiful way came together.
Incredible.
The Cincinnati people that they were outside the hospital, and of course Bill's Mafia and everyone else contributing. What last number I heard was $8 million to DeMar's fund, and Lamar's forever changed from it too. I mean, this is a guy who, in a very positive way, and already who had a great tradition, a great example of caring about his teammates and his community. This is a guy who's going to be a really powerful figure, I think, for positive change and for doing good things and using that stage as athletes. So, we're going to talk about football here in a second, but the other side of it is that these players become markers. They become powerful storytellers and examples that inspire our better angels. So I'm just excited because, when we take care of ourselves, when we take care of each other, when we take care of the guys that sacrifice their bodies for the game, I think there are only good things that come from that.
Yeah, no doubt about that. No, definitely no doubt about it. I want to ask one more question regarding this, and I don't want to put a damper on anything that you're saying, but how frustrating as a former player, Nick, is it to see, and we didn't know a lot of people didn't know a lot, and then you're right, I was waiting for the worst news possible that could happen with the DeMar Hamlin thing, staying up all night, watching Van Pelt on ESPN and just waiting for that news I didn't want to hear, and thank God we never heard that news. But how disappointing is it for you as a former player to know that in the first 3 years or something, or first 4 years, if a player is injured while they're playing the game of football, they basically lose half their salary going forward and not make the full salary that they were actually signed for if they don't have a guaranteed contract?
Well, I don't know the exact specifics. I was a player up for 11 years. I was actually on Nightline with Ted Koppel the first day of the lockout, semi-strike, if you will, in 1987. But there are a lot of changes since then. I believe that there is some qualification now for second-year players to qualify for the pension. But if you're in your actual career, I did not know that half of your salary is taken. Did not know that. I think that's really more dependent on the actual injury itself and what happens. But and whether that person can play again. But these are things that are evolving. That's actually a lot better than it was. I mean, back the injuries were still the same. The helmets were terrible. The level of concussions and, of course, the hitting during practice. We had the Oklahoma drill every training camp with Marty Schottenheimer, and I'm so proud to have my name next to Marty in Arrowhead Stadium. But that Oklahoma drill, I didn't have to do it. But everybody else, I mean, that was just no way that you wouldn't be pounding each other's helmet against helmet, and see who you could tackle if you're a linebacker with a running back coming through against an offensive lineman to shed him, and the collisions right there was sort of the beast of football. It was exciting. But they've changed rules now, so the current players don't have to do that. The number of practices is way shut down. Frankly, the tackling, for the most part, is not as good as it was. But, players tend still, and this is somebody who was a terrible tackler, I might say, although he got pretty good at hitting guys out of bounds. But, players will hit with ferocity, absolutely. But the wrapping up, the form tackling, the things that actually protect your body and get the other guy down most efficiently, most players would probably, in an honest moment, would say that it's not quite what it could be. And that's a sacrifice, I guess, that was consciously made because you want to preserve guys. But the game is as popular as ever. It's 4 times more popular than baseball and basketball, 5 times more popular than hockey. And there's a reason for that. It's not going away. So best thing that ever happened to me, Marty Schottenheimer was the best coach. I had another great coach in Marv Levy, in 97, I think, at this point. And what he said still goes for me. Where else would you rather be?
Yep. Well, let me ask you this. We'll get into the game in a second. I want you to talk about, the mental aspect of a kicker during the regular season is amazing. Talk about when you get into the playoffs, how much more the mental aspect plays a role in a kicker's success.
Well, in every player's success, experience makes a huge difference, but particularly for the kickers. And I just read something that's very interesting. So I've never heard of this before, but apparently what Dallas would do on grass is they'd grab a piece of grass that had a little bit of paint on it, and they'd put it right in the spot where the ball was supposed to be to help the holder who's taking his eye off the spot. He's keeping his hand down there, but at a certain point, if he's a holding for a right-footed kicker, his left hand, which is on the ball where the place where the ball is going to be placed, has to come up to catch the ball. And so sometimes they miss that spot where the ball really should be by 1 inch. Sometimes it's dead on. Sometimes they're 4 or 5 inches off. And that makes a huge difference. The kicker is coming towards the ball. He sees the ball, and it's spinning, and then it stops spinning for maybe a quarter of a second. 1/4 of a second, maybe a third of a second if he's lucky, before he kicks it. And so those little things matter. And the referee apparently told Dallas that they couldn't use that little fleck of white painted grass to mark the spot. So that may have freaked out the kicker more than necessary. I don't know what will happen against San Francisco. But mentally, here's a stat for you. In the playoffs, the games that are decided by special teams, by punt returns, punt block, kickoff return, field goal block, those things go from 1/3 of the games to 2/3 of the games. And so every game's more highly contested. You might remember last year, every single game of the playoff games went down to final field goals. It was unbelievable. So you've got to prepare yourself that it is going to come down to you. But it is a lot of pressure, and being able to manage it comes down to being able to put that right amount of healthy but significant pressure on yourself during practice. So you literally can play the role of just being at practice, not going through the motions, so to speak, but just acting out and attacking the ball without trying to be too perfect. What's going to be interesting for Brett Maher is, just to relax. And the only way to exercise the demon, if you will, of last week is going to be kicking that game-winning field goal and nailing a couple field goals for his team so they win. And so we're all going to watch and I'm going to be holding my breath because he's under a phenomenal amount of pressure. At the same time, I really don't think that Mike McCarthy had any choice to replace him. He had a great year besides that.
Yep, he sure did. Now, let's talk about the game real quickly coming up. Obviously, the Jaguars are some unbelievable comeback versus San Diego. what are the keys? I mean, obviously the Chiefs, on paper, are the much better team. What are the keys for the Kansas City Chiefs to prevail in this game?
Well, number one, I would not say we're a much better team. Jacksonville's won 6 games in a row. Trevor Lawrence and the entire team is a different team. They're playing much more efficiently. And even in that first matchup in the 10th week, he was 29 for 40 for 250 yards, 58 yards. He's throwing a lot of shorter passes. But the thing we did really well with Chris Jones and company, we were second in the NFL in sacks. We put pressure on them. So I would say the key thing for us is to watch what we've done.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina, right here on WWBG, 1470 AM, and TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. And boy, do we have a lot of sports to talk about today. We're going to go ahead and talk about the Carolina Panthers. Who's going to be the next head coach of your Panthers? Number 2, we're going to talk about the NFL playoffs. Unbelievable games coming up. And we're going to have a special guest the second segment. Former Tampa Bay Buccaneer and New England Patriot, legendary cornerback Ricky Reynolds will be joining us. We will talk about the Hornets and do they have the right coach or is it time to make the move? Also, we have ACC, that's right, ACC basketball to talk about, and then later on in the show, we're less than 3 weeks away, it's NASCAR racing we're going to talk about. We're going to also have a very special guest for you then, as we are planning on having award-winning NASCAR reporter from Fox Sports, Bob Parkris, on with us as well. So let's go ahead and let's get it started. And we talked about this last week.
So there's a confidence, but
we hit on it some, and I don't know why David Tepper is making this decision so much more difficult than it needs to be. That's David Tepper, the owner of the Carolina Panthers and the Charlotte FC. And you wonder, what is he doing? What is he doing? I'm going to tell you right now.
Like 33 to 27.
If David Tepper does not pick Steve Wilkes as his next head coach, it just shows you how poor of an excuse he is for an owner in the National Football League. I said it. Said it. How can't you pick this guy? What do you look for in a head coach? You look for a coach who has a proven track record of winning. All right.
Closing out games.
Steve Wilkes
when we have to,
took over a 1-4 team that was decimated. Didn't even want to play anymore. Got him to go 6-6.
You run, Nick,
easily could have been 8-4.
Got to go all the way back to 1993.
It is what it is.
I believe it was your last
you look for leadership. Don't tell me this guy has not proven the ability to have leadership here. He's changed his culture 180%. Just unbelievable what this guy has done. The players have bought into him. They want to play for him. They want to win for him. They want to throw it to the wolves for him. Do whatever is necessary to win. Okay, you can't get that from players just by putting any other coach in there.
When we drafted Derek Thomas,
the results on the field show the image of the coach. If that hasn't been more exemplified in the last 12 games of the season, I don't know what you've been watching.
The exact same thing as an athlete.
Steve Wilkes has completely changed the image of this team, the culture of this team, and has gone back to Carolina Panthers.
He was a great athlete,
and that's what you want in a coach. Yes, Frank Reich is out there. What has he done lately except lose?
And he's very bright. So
all he's done is lose. In Indianapolis, they had to throw him out of there. Jim Caldwell, not a bad coach. Give him a lot of credit. 62
yes, it is. Well, Nick,
they're talking about Ken Dorsey. The offensive
I wanna thank you
line,
so very much.
offensive
Taking
coordinator
time
in
out of your
Buffalo.
busy schedule
Okay,
to join us
hasn't
on
proven anything
Frankly
yet.
Speaking Sports
Steve
Carolina.
Wilkes just did
Thank you, brother. I enjoyed
what
it.
he just
All right, buddy,
showed
be
you,
safe.
showcased for you
All
the
right, that
past
was the
12
great Nick
weeks
Larry.
what he
Well,
can do as
folks,
a head coach.
we're out of
I'm
time.
telling you
What a
what,
week.
it just
Enjoy
goes
the
to
football
prove to
games
you.
this week, and we'll be back next week. Same time, same place. Good night.